Well, guess what?
Back again.
It's back
Back again.
again.
And we're back. And we're back.
They're back again.
Back again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Back Again Sequel Podcast, the only podcast that takes a sequel from the past and finds out if it's still worth going back again. As always, I'm Matt,
I'm Drew.
and today we are kicking off Spooky Season 2025 by watching the follow-up to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, and we are doing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2.
13 years ago, audiences across America were horrified by the savagery of a faceless killer. In the wake of this bizarre rampage, he vanished. Now, after more than a decade of silence, he has come out of hiding. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. The buzz is back.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is once again directed by Tobe Hooper. It's written by Louis Minor Carson. It's starring Dennis Hopper, Caroline Williams, Jim Sado, Bill Moseley, and Bill Johnson. Chainsaw-wielding maniac Leatherface is up to his cannibalistic ways once again, along with the rest of his brothers, known only as the Cook and Chop Top. This time, the killer siblings have set their sights on a pretty DJ named Stretch, who teams up with a rogue lieutenant named Lefty, seeking revenge for his niece and nephew 13 years after the events of the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All right, Drew, here we are kicking off Spooky Season 2025, and we are doing a follow-up to, I guess, like one of the most influential horror movies ever made, right?
Yeah, you could say that about a lot of horror movies, but I think what's so specific about this one is how early it was, the original, which predates quite a lot of movies, especially traditional horror movies.
Yeah, and it also created, like, the final girl trope. A lot of people think, like, Halloween did that with Jamie Lee Curtis, but Sally Hardesty is technically the first, like, final girl in a sense that we've ever seen. Yeah, and then what's also interesting, just like with this podcast in particular, you know, we've seen other examples of how people decide to do their sequels, and oftentimes I feel like we look for something maybe radically different, but the sequel to this it's a completely different tone and movie. This is more of like a Gremlins 2 kind of situation.
I was going to connect it. I thought it was like a one-for-one for the Evil Dead situation, where they bite off more than they can chew, kind of. They release kind of a successful but flawed first attempt, and then when they have the experience, they come back years later and they give it like a comedic edge, which very weird that both movies did kind of the exact same track.
I mean, what's also weird is that, you know, the first one, that's like an art house movie. That's like a very like low budget, people really trying to go for an idea that they had with no resources, like shooting in Texas and everybody's miserable during the shoot. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but what it contributed to the horror genre, just as far as like atmosphere and as far as just like the dread of like the South, I guess.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of like beautiful shots in that movie, but with this sequel, it's such a radical shift, and I looked it up, and Tobe Hooper said that his intention with the first one was to have more dark comedic moments, but I think because of like limited resources and because of the fact that like audiences had never seen anything like this before, I just think it probably went over their head, because I don't find a lot of like funny moments in that first one. It's more like uncomfortable dread. So I think with the second one, he was like, okay, I'll do a second one, but then we got to really like lean into the dark comedy that I wanted from the first one.
And that's good. That's what it needed.
I guess, but at the same time, they are just completely different movies tonally.
I think the beginning is scary. I'm talking specifically about when they're chasing down the kids on the road.
The two college students?
Yeah, and the calls being recorded by Stretch, who is a DJ, right? Yeah. That, I think, was successful in portraying like horror and dread. And then you have Chop Top and Leatherface attack, and you have Bill Moseley being creepy, but then immediately the reveal of Leatherface is he accidentally attacks Bill Moseley instead of the girl, and then he gets yelled at. And that's kind of where I think the pivot really happened, because that was fucking hilarious.
Well, I guess in general, the three brothers, even if we just compared them to the first and the second, So there definitely is this fine line of just like, I guess we could do it a combination of like mental illness and maybe like an inbred family and just the way that they behave and the way like their mannerisms are, which comes across very disturbing, I think, in the first one. But then in the second one, it does kind of feel like Three Stooges, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So I do agree that there are moments that are still like dreadful, and I would actually say it's more you're kind of anxious. You're like, ooh, what's gonna happen because he's acting so creepy.
Mhm.
But I think that they replace the horror element of the first one with like gore and effects by bringing Tom Savini on, and then having the brothers just be like, Larry, Curly, and Moe. So it's not scary, but it's still engaging and makes you like on the edge of your seat.
What makes it engaging is, and I really like this, it is horror for the characters. Stretch and Lefty and all the victims, they're terrified the entire time. Like, it's not funny to them. And those performances really help sell it as like a straight horror instead of a horror comedy. This is a horror with comedians as the killers, essentially.
Yeah, and in general, maybe because we're so used to it by now, but like, because I'm going to say obviously really nice things about like the set design of the movie, and especially when you get to that, I think it's called like Texas land or like the battlefield land or something in the third act. That whole design is awesome, and I think we just get so used to seeing like body parts and blood like in more modern movies. But even for back then, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's scary because there's like they're cannibal family, and they're not only chopping up all these body parts and hanging them around their new home, but then they're also taking the body parts and feeding it back to the community to win chili cook-off contests.
Drayton, you've got to tell the secret of that fabulously tasty chili.
No secret. It's the meat. Don't skimp on the meat.
But even that is kind of like more funny than it is scary, with at least the way that they execute it. I don't know. It's definitely a horror movie in the sense of like what's going on and like the things that we're looking at visually. I mean, LG's character gets like skinned and he gets his face cut off and all that kind of stuff. But it's still delivered with like a comedic punchline. Like before he dies, like his last word that he says before he dies is,
Shit.
and then he just dies.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, these are all inherently scary, terrifying things, but even the punchline to his death is like a comedic punchline, right?
Yeah. But that's the thing, is like he's probably like the one exception where he's like kind of the openly comedic victim, but even he is like taking the situation seriously. Like he's trying to get Stretch. He's trying to save her life, essentially. One thing that really stuck out to me, and I'm sorry if this is a huge deviation, was how much one-to-one this was with the original, especially with the whole father or grandfather character who like looks like he's dead. He's essentially a zombie. That's all like a one-to-one translation.
Like they repeat those beats.
Exactly.
Like saying, right?
Yeah. That's I don't know why, because this is technically a sequel. It's like the Lefty plays a family member of two of the victims from the first one.
Yeah, and we can actually go into that because like, the movie starts once again with like a scroll, and it says that it's 13 years later. Obviously the continuation of just the family changing their name from like the McCobb family to the Sawyer family. And then, like you just said, you have the character of Lefty, who is the uncle of the two characters from the first one, the one in the wheelchair and his sister, and he is seeking revenge. And then I guess it's just then the repeated beats that we know, which is, Leatherface skinning people, a big fantastic dinner scene, and some kind of dance with a chainsaw at the end. Like, I'm sure there's more, but those are like three kind of big staples to this kind of franchise, right?
I mean, the big general one is, yeah, you have the final girl running around the hell on earth, essentially, where in the first one it's just a house, but in this one it is a whole like converted theme park that somehow got underground at the same time. I love that location makes no logical sense.
No, but it was awesome. And like when you watch like the making of and the behind the scenes stuff, the fact that that's all like stuff that they built and they had to figure out how to light it, and they have to just work with what they have. Like, I think really quick, just to kind of give it its praise just from a technical aspect, it's really cool just seeing a movie like this that, I don't know, there's a lot of elements where it's like, my God, I can't believe they made that. But also it's like, how did they do that? And it really helps when you have great set design and then you have Tom Savini like doing the makeup, But I mean, even just to continue the through line between 1 and 2, even if you look at Leatherface himself, I mean, I guess because he's more of like an infant mind in the first one, it would make sense that he's now in his like teenage years.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a whole love story between him and Stretch.
Love story.
Bubba's got a girlfriend.
But the real spine of the connective tissue between the first and the second has to be Dennis Hopper's character as Lefty, right? Because he's the one that is the most passionate about not forgetting the first one because he's looking to get revenge.
Yeah, because he provides a listening ear for Stretch, who has the evidence of the cannibalistic attack on her tape, but has no one to take it to or no one who will listen to her until Lefty shows up.
Yeah, but you know what's also weird about that? And we're going to get into like deleted scenes and the reason, like certain storylines that got cut and everything. But I thought it was weird watching this time how Stretch shows up to like the hotel that he's staying at. First of all, he looks like tweaked out of his mind for some reason. He's being very weird. But then she comes in, she goes, I have a tape of the killings. I heard about you somehow. And like, I want to get your help. I want to bring you on the show and I want to talk about it and bring light to all this stuff. And Dennis Hopper's like, no, I don't need your help. I do this alone. And he like immediately disregards her and pushes her away. But then the next time we see him, he's now shown up at the radio station, sitting on the steps, waiting for Stretch. And he's like, I need your help. And it's like, oh, what's why all of a sudden? You know what I mean? We reveal later that he said that he was using her as like bait, or just like using her to find out where their like place of operation was or whatever. But that storyline felt very like choppy to me.
Mm-hmm. You needed to be a little bit more keen on where Dennis Hopper was coming from, that he was going to use her as bait, because he really just springs that on you as the viewer at the end. And it feels like it was something that was kind of tacked on last minute.
Well, I think in general too, like a benefit of this movie is how fast it moves along, even though there are scenes that I think kind of drag out a little bit. But it's really interesting rewatching it, being like, okay, you have the opening scene with the two frat bros. They get killed. That audio plays at the radio station. We also establish that the cook, the Sawyer family, is in town. Then after she meets Dennis Hopper and Dennis Hopper gets his chainsaws, the next scene is really just back at the radio station where Chop Top and Leatherface show up. And then from there, it's just a continuation of the night. You know what I mean? And we do spend a lot of time in, I'm just going to call it Nomland, even though it's not Nomland. We spend like, you know, pretty much all of the second half of Act 2 and Act 3 all in Nomland, you know what I mean? And that is like where the most fun visual stuff is happening. But I don't know, it's kind of interesting how it's just kind of like bump, ba-dump, ba-dump. And it's just kind of like 3 big beats and that's like the whole movie, you know what I mean? Like we never see any other locations besides really like the radio station and then Nomland.
I can appreciate though, it's very efficient. Because it doesn't feel like anything's really missing. You don't need much else. I do think the initial kind of buildup with Chop Top talking to her and just kind of like being weird and off-putting before Leatherface shows up was a little bloated. They probably could have trimmed that and gotten to Leatherface sooner. But yeah, you really just need the setup and then you can just go right into your action on the back half. I really like that it didn't kind of waste time developing the characters, which is nice because the first one didn't really do that either. You kind of get to know the characters in the first one along with the hitchhiker, as you know, he's being creepy in the first act.
I mean, it's interesting because it's like that first one is such a roadmap to what we see so many movies do, where you have like the teenagers that go somewhere and they interact with like a dangerous thing and then, you know, it's told through their eyes. This one is just inherently different because even our first interaction with the Sawyer family and Leatherface is through these 2 like frat guys who are just driving down the highway, like shooting their pistols at signs, calling in the radio station to Stretch. Like the connective tissue to how Stretch, our new female lead, like comes in contact with our villains is very like unconventional, and I do like that aspect of it. It's just so weird to go from like the first one to this one.
Yeah. Well, it's very contrived because you have to, like, this is before cell phones. So it's like, it's not just like, oh yeah, they call in the radio station from their car. It's like, no, this has to be a car that has a built-in telephone. And it's like, I don't know how rare that was for 1986, but that seems very, it's weird because nowadays it's like, oh yeah, they got a phone in their car. But at the time that must have been so out of place. Unless these frat guys are just super wealthy.
Well, not only that, when they call the radio station, there's just no way to get them off the line unless they hang up first.
Is that like a rule or something?
I have no idea.
That was so weird. I just kind of like put that off, but it's like, yeah, they're just being so like, rude on purpose to Stretch, and she can't hang up.
They don't have the technology to hang up the phone on the other line, which is gonna be the reason why all these events like take place. I guess that's the thing. It's like, if we knew that this was Lefty's plan to basically lure, the Sawyer family like to her.
You think so?
Well, that's the thing. When he says kind of like vaguely when she's about to fall in that hole, I use you as bait. It's like, well, what was the bait then? Because she plays the tape. You cut to the cook driving his truck and he hears it on the radio because the brothers call and tell him. And then that's the cue to go after her and get the tape back because they want to stay hidden.
Well, now you're explaining it to me. It really just seems like Lefty's pulling the strings. So now it actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, if there was a little bit more stuff in there, and just to kind of get into like some of the deleted scenes, because most of the deleted scenes are about like Lefty.
I can imagine, yeah.
The first one was that, Lefty is like obviously experiencing a lot of dread from not being able to find these people that killed his niece and nephew for like over a decade. And there was a scene where he's in his hotel room before Stretch shows up, and he eats a worm at the bottom of a tequila bottle, and he like hallucinates. And they had plans for him to be like freaking out in his hotel room where chainsaws are coming through the walls on every angle. And they had this like 360 shot set up to like show his paranoia. And then Stretch knocks on the door. So when he answers the door and he looks like miserable, that's the reason why. But the big thing that they cut out of this movie was a storyline that Stretch was Lefty's long lost illegitimate daughter.
I'm glad they cut that. Yeah, like I said, I don't know why. I really like this film being lean, and I can totally see why all that stuff was cut.
Well, it's lean, but then there are also scenes that really drag out, and I think that's a good transition to talk briefly about the scene where Stretch is at the radio station, and Stretch is hiding in like a storage area where there's a bunch of sodas and ice and stuff for like the football game this weekend, and Leatherface crashes through the wall and he's got his chainsaw. And then we have this very weird scene where she convinces him to not kill her by like saying that he's a very good boy to some retrospect, right? And listen, if you do any research online, people have talked about this scene before, and there's behind the scenes where Bill Johnson, who played Leatherface in this one, he talks about it as well.
It unrolled exactly as it was written on the page. I knew what I was in for. I didn't think it'd be that cold, that wet.
The ice tub scene is a little, delicate. This is a delicate scene.
Trying to make it sexy, oh man, it was a dance. It was a dance.
Delicate.
So it's like that's me trying to do this thing where in the second one Leatherface is like in his teenage years, and that's why he is fallen in love with Stretch. But it's so what can you say?
It wouldn't have worked if the film wasn't so comedic. I think having your serial killer Leatherface going through his awkward hormonal teenage years.
I don't know. There's a big stretch from him, like, in the first one, he's sitting in a chair and he's like got his hands in his face. There's like that moment where like he's feeling like really down and sad and like worried about what's going on. And then in this one, I mean, it's just him dancing. There's so much dancing of Leatherface.
That's how he expresses his sexuality.
I don't want to hear that again.
It's interesting. There's a lot of interesting comparisons between this movie and House of Thousand Corpses, but
Yes.
I think the immediate connection, and the only one I really kind of want to talk about, is Bill Moseley essentially playing the same character in each. It was a little bit one note in this. I wanted to see a little bit more of maybe, and that's the thing, is Toby Hooper is all about like the political commentary to an extent, so it's like I would have liked to see more of like a Vietnam veteran angle to his character. They really only have it that he's obsessed with music, quote unquote, but like I don't even know if that was an act he just put on to terrify Stretch, or if he actually really cared.
The headplate too.
The headplate, yeah. I wish they had like not made him so like, when you say like Three Stooges, that's pretty accurate insofar as it's like one note, one dimensional. I wish they had done a little bit more. The chef or the cook is a little bit more interesting because he has to be the one in charge, so that inherently gives him a kind of like another angle. Then you have the stuff going on with Leatherface and his hormones. So yeah, the Chop Top I think is inherently the most interesting character, but I think is the flattest one, unfortunately, in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I like Bill Moseley in general, just like as a person and as an actor. And
the performance is good.
Yeah, and you know what got him this role is he was a big fan of the first one, and he and his wife ended up doing a parody video called the Texas Chainsaw Manicure. And long story short, he knew somebody that knew Toby Hooper, so they showed it to Toby Hooper, and he was like, "Oh, this is cool. If I ever do a sequel, I'll let you know." So then he was cast in the sequel when they did it. To connect that to House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie has not shied away from the fact that the Sawyer family and Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2 were extremely influential on him doing Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. And on one hand, you could say that it's him paying homage to those movies that he loves. In a more cynical light, you could say that he's like copy pasting a lot of elements.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of more of an homage than it is just a cynical copy and pasting, because I think there is so much personality in those movies.
Occasionally our campus erupts into a flawless postmodern homage to action-adventure mythology, mischaracterized by the ignorant as parody.
I really do like, though, that there is like a finality like to this movie, in the sense that once like Lefty storms Nomland, and he's just like, he's got his chainsaws and he's going through the tunnels and he's just yelling like, "Tear it all down."
I'm bringing it down! Down, down! Bring it all down!
But once he finally gets to the famous dinner scene and he starts fighting everybody, and then you have the cook underneath the table with the grenade, and you know, Lefty has successfully, like, on some level defeated 2 out of the 3 brothers, and then they all blow up, you know what I mean? And there's like a nice like, okay, we're done, even though we're not going to be done because there's like 9 sequels after this. But you know, I like the fact that at least for these characters that, I don't know, it's like they made it this far and now it's over.
Well, you're forgetting about the whole epilogue with Stretch, where she goes to the peak.
Yeah, Stretch runs away and Chop Top follows after her, and that reveals where Grandma is, which is at the top of that, I don't know, like thing. What do you call that? It's just a monument.
Yeah. I love that Grandma had a working chainsaw in her lap.
And like she takes the chainsaw from the grandma and she kills Chop Top with it, and then she does her dance, which
she does the dance.
And it's really funny when you watch the behind the scenes of the making of Texas Chainsaw 2, because like everybody is so like lovely and so like nice and so like appreciative of just like being able to make movies, and or even when they're just talking about Bill Moseley, like Bill Johnson will say something like very beautiful about Bill Moseley, but then like you remember the movie when he's like, "Suck my plate, you donkey dick." And it's just such an interesting like dynamic of like people that made this movie together and then the actual movie that they made. You know?
Bill Moseley, what a enigmatic, ineffable, wonderful person.
Hey, lick my plate, you dog dick!
To get a little bit into the budget and the box office of these 2 films, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, it's got a budget up to about $140,000, and it made $30.9 million at the box office. So this is like a huge hit. So that was the first one. So then the second, from 1986, It's got a budget of $4.5 to $4.6 million, and it made $8 million at the box office.
That sucks. I would have thought it was at least a little bit of a success financially.
It got a big like cult following, and people have appreciated it over the years. And I think it did a couple different DVD releases, like a second DVD release called the Gruesome Edition in 2006. So it's definitely like gotten love, and I can tell that it's been remastered because even when you watch this on like Amazon, like it looks really good.
Absolutely.
And then just to get into the Rotten Tomatoes scores, so the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's got a critical score of 84%, and then it's got an audience score of an 82%. And then, like we said, it's a very influential film in regards to the horror genre and what it contributed to it. But then Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 has a critical score of a 52%, and then it's got an audience score of a 47%, which I was shocked by the audience score.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I really think the second one is just so much better. I can't believe there's that much love for the first one. It's good, but it's not like the sequel.
Well, we have the benefit of just like being able to watch it all these years later. Like I think it's refreshing seeing a sequel that is so radically different and that does take big swings. But I bet at the time people were like, what the hell is this? Like I thought this was a horror movie.
To be fair, the advertising campaign and the movie poster broadcasted this as a comedy. Because you saw the poster that is like the parody of The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, which is and I think, you know, even from the first initial frame where you have these two idiots calling in to Stretch and shooting their gun and just being freaking like that 80s like coked up character, like crazy trope. I think Tobe Hooper told everyone from the get-go, like, this is what we're doing. And I just think audiences were like, well, we don't want that. You know what I mean? Because the first one is like, you know, a horror movie. It doesn't even show you a lot of gore in that first one. It leaves it up to the imagination. And in the second one, it's you're very good boy.
Oh, are you really good?
If you have to ask, your street's fine.
So as always on this podcast, we ask 3 questions that lead to a final vote of was it worth going back again? And the first question is, does it work as a sequel? I'm trying to figure out how like hard I want to be on this movie. I would say that it's more of a sequel than like a soft reboot, just because there are characters and through lines from 1 to 2. The question is, does it work as a sequel? I would say no, just because of the big tonal shift. I think I have to apply this the same way that we would do Evil Dead 2 without the reboot mentality. I think because of the fact that it's tonally going for something completely different makes it like it makes it not work as a sequel in the sense of like, hey, I watched this first movie, it was really good, I want to see the second one now. And when you watch the second one, because it's such a tonal shift, it's like that doesn't work to what I just saw in the first one. I would say no, it doesn't work as a sequel, right? Like it's so different.
I agree with what you're saying, but I do think it does. I think a big reason why it does work is you have the same creative voice with Tobe Hooper. And he is kind of like you alluded to, he's coming back and doing it on his own terms. He's taking 13 years between movies to do it because he wants to, not because the studio's paying him to. I think you can have a big tonal shift like what he did. Especially because there are still satirical elements in the first one. It's not coming out of left field. I think it's still appropriate enough to be a good sequel, or at least to be deemed a competent sequel, a functional sequel.
All right, so that sounds like it's going to get a check and an X. So the next question is going to be, is it enjoyable / entertaining?
I think these last 2 are going to be easier questions. I think it is. Absolutely. I had a lot of fun watching this, a lot more fun than I did the first one. This might be one of my favorite horror films just because it is so different.
Yeah, and I mean, I just don't think that Tobe Hooper and any of them knew the impact that first one was going to have, like on culture and also on just like film history. And like that whole dinner scene at the end of the first one is like so dreadful, whereas in the dinner scene at the end of the second one is so like ridiculous and silly. And because of those reasons, like obviously, yeah, the second one is enjoyable / entertaining. So I'm going to give it a check too. I don't think that the second one is a perfect movie. I do think that there are still moments that drag, but it is very easy to watch. I think that it's very like, it's kind of like beautifully shot. It's very colorful. But then, yeah, it also just comes with some of these scenes where it's like, what the hell is going on here? So that sounds like it's going to get an easy 2 checks. So the last question is going to be, does it need to exist? I'll make this one quick, and I will say yes, I think it needs to exist, especially just within the Texas Chainsaw franchise. This is the only movie we have that is tonally different from the rest of the franchise, that has like some, I don't know, some really interesting ideas and big swings. And I think because it's just so unique and out there, it's like, yeah, it needs to exist because the franchise hasn't given us anything else really worth talking about as much as the second one, you know?
I kind of agree 100%. Yeah, I think it needs to exist because it's too unique not to, and because the franchise, which is so big at this point, would be so boring without it.
So if you're doing that math at home, that's going to be 5 checks and 1 X. That means that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is going to get 1 giant check for worth going back again. As always, thanks so much for listening. If you like this episode, you can listen to all our episodes of the Back Again Sequel podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search Back Again Sequel podcast, or you can watch these episodes with video on YouTube. Just subscribe to @wag.productions. And outside of that, you got anything else to add, Drew?
Hey, lick my plate, you dog dick!
All right, we will see you next time.